if you read my book, if you read the first part of it a couple of times, the big takeaway is don't over innovate.
Hmm. Yeah. Make small tweaks,
Because,
right?
yeah, because that's how you wind up um, buried in sort of the niche within the niche. I mean, I think that's
Absolutely.
been going on with some of the baby food brands recently. Just to be
Yeah.
honest.
This is Evolve CPG, a community of purpose driven brand leaders who not only believe in better, but actively pursue it. That's better products, better brands, and better leadership for a better world. You can join our online community right now where we're going further, faster together at community.evolvecpg.com. Join us. I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder and creative director of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow and scale their impact. On this episode, we're speaking with Dr. James Richardson, author of Ramping Your Brand and founder of Premium Growth Solutions, about the actual data behind how brands grow and the importance of retaining customers.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Gage. I'm a culture anthropologist who wandered into the back door of business through market research first, and then I moved into strategy consulting for leadership teams at big food and beverage companies.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me. I've almost finished your book, Ramping Your Brand, and I've been really enjoying that book and digging into, started following you on LinkedIn and digging into more of your background. And thought it would be really interesting to both kind of talk about your background because I think you've got a unique mix of experience, but also dive into some of the content in the book that I think would be super
Sure.
helpful for other people. And like, we'll encourage them to read the full book, but if we can give them some nuggets from the book, that'd be great. So before
Okay.
we dive into the book though, like you started out in cultural anthropology. What drew you into that in the first place? And then along your journey, why did you decide to leave academia?
Uh, I bet we have a lot of liberal arts grads listening.
Yep,
so,
myself included.
so, yeah, I wanted to be a professor from the age of 16. So I think I'm 50
Interesting.
now, and that clearly didn't work out. But it was probably for the best. Um, I got into anthropology because I had questions about, I think, the human condition that were driving me nuts. And I also I had zero interest in traditional office culture and working in like a business, which is ironic.
I hear that.
Um, so, uh, I also have high functioning autism. I didn't know that till I was 35.
Oh,
And so a lot of these decisions were probably being made by my mind adapting to my weaknesses.
yeah.
And academia is a great place for people like me to go basically hide from the universe, which is not necessarily a great motive in life.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
but I do like to. I'm an analyst at heart, and that hasn't really changed. So I left for a bunch of reasons, most of which nobody wants to hear about. Um, but when I made that decision, I went into market research because I figured I needed some at least analytical place to land. Otherwise, I didn't feel like I was going to be comfortable. And that turned out to be, I mean, it was awkward, but it was awkward having business clients. But I definitely at first, but I adapted slowly, slower than I should have. but uh, I it was ended up being a really great transition. I just found pretty quickly that I didn't really enjoy market research for like
Oh,
CPG
interesting. Okay.
companies because the people we were working with aren't really, they weren't decision makers. So when
Oh, okay.
I got a chance early on to work with some CMOs,
Yeah.
and once I got to that level in the corporate world, started having conversations at that level, it got a lot more interesting, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so what I transitioned into consulting pretty early on, uh,
Yeah.
and so we're
And your business
building,
is
and that's
premium growth
basic
solutions, right?
right, and that's what I do now, full time. And I decided to work with early stage companies because the gap the gap in terms of like the strategic planning, which is what I help clients with, is the biggest there in terms of just the lack of experience in doing that for your average early stage company. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
contrary to what we see in the business media, folks, the average early stage company that makes it to eight figures, the founders are not professionals from the industry.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
So don't be fooled by who gets the press time, because a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with PR agencies.
Yeah. So
So most of the people are like most of my clients. They are. I just said it in a blog post. They designed something really clever. It took off, and they're now having a no shit moment. Like, oh, now this can't fail because I'm actually succeeding. Oh crap!
yeah.
Right, and believe me, the terror grows as these businesses scale. Like once you start
Yeah.
succeeding, it gets more terrifying because now there's something at stake to lose, right? And so that's where I try to
Absolutely.
come in and take what I learned at the big companies. I mean, I've worked in over 75 different categories all over the grocery store, and work with almost every multinational in CPG. So
Wow.
I know sort of the patterns, and I know what was useful about that process. Very little, um, and I've taken just the good stuff, and then I've adapted it with the research you see in my book to create basically a stripped down strategic planning process that makes sense for a 7-figure or 8-figure company that's doing well already and wants to
Yeah.
keep growing. Uh, don't work with startups anymore. Um,
Is there a reason?
yeah, I think. Well, to be honest, I don't get a lot of them approaching me, especially
Because
after
they
book.
just because they
Yeah,
don't know what they don't know yet. Maybe.
well, that could be. I don't. That could be. I mean, I haven't done a survey. I
Yeah.
would love to have done a survey for my book. Hey, here's what 80% of
Hey,
startup founders believe about the universe, but there's no
there's
way to
something for
find them.
addition too.
Yeah, there's no way to find them. There's no way to get a generalized sample. Anyways, so I um, I found I actually did work with startups when I was writing the book because I needed to kind of. It was partly to pay the bills, but mainly to do market research. I
Yeah.
need to understand my client better to help my own business. So
Of course.
it ended up
Makes
being
sense.
really good market research for the book because I was able to write it in a tone that would appeal to people who were ambitious but amateur.
Yeah.
The secondary audience for the book is actually the pros,
Yeah. That makes sense.
like John
Okay. And
Foraker, who I work with, because they rather. I mean, I could have written. It would be very easy to write a book. Here's what you know professionals don't understand about early stage brands, right? But that becomes it was very argumentative really quickly.
yeah.
So to reach to reach people who are actually have experience but are still missing things, it's much easier to talk to another audience
That
who
makes a
are
lot of sense. Yeah.
who are the amateurs because they're most of them are not crazy arrogant. They know that they don't. They may not know exactly what they don't know, but they do know that they don't know stuff.
Yeah. They know that they're new to the industry or new to
Yeah,
being a
exactly.
CEO or new to being a founder or new to being a fundraiser.
But
Yeah.
what I found to answer your question is that startups in what I call phase one, under 500,000 in company revenue, they are so overwhelmed with operational cash flow issues. They do not often have the cognitive ability to step back and have a strategic planning session. So
Yeah.
one of it is emotional and cognitive. There's no space for this for what I do. And the other thing is that they don't have any data on their fans. So
Right.
the one thing I I learned in market research is that you can't even the general manager of Oreo does no strategic planning without fresh insights about their consumers. I kid you not.
Yeah.
You would think they would be so arrogant that they would just say, research, screw the consumer. My name's Don Draper. I'm going to make it up. We're
Totally.
Oreo. Beat my chest like a gorilla. We'll do it. No, no. These
Yeah.
people don't run these businesses that way.
Although I almost feel like the bigger the company, the more necessary the research, by which I mean the
Yeah,
bigger the company, the more people there are in the company, the more people that are there probably not from a background in that company or a passion for that product, but like they're just ladder climbers in the
yeah,
corporate world. And so they get in there and they literally like I've talked to people in these big conglomerates where they get bounced from brand to brand like every year or two. So they're coming into some of these companies like Oreo, not knowing anything about who's buying Oreo or what the sales look like. So like having
correct,
some
correct.
research
Yeah,
to like ground them a little more is
Yep.
helpful.
Yeah, it keeps them objective. It's also a training tool for the, like you
Yeah.
said, for the staff who have to go and do things. But the people who actually make the big decisions are not the brand
Hmm.
managers; it's the general manager. Those people don't rotate nearly as often. So there
Yeah.
is some
Okay, that
more
makes sense.
continuity there, and that's where I did a lot of consulting work because they would bring in people who wanted a fresh pair of their eyes. Um,
Okay. Are you
and that
still
was
doing consulting work with some of the bigger
no,
brands like that?
I shut that all off when I started this company. I do corporate speeches. That's about it. But I
Gotcha.
don't
Okay.
enjoy working for those teams per se. Um, been there, done
So
that.
how are
But
you
to me,
working with companies right now? Because I know you're
so
obviously a consultant fractional, but are you like coming in and engaging with them for like 3 years, or are you coming in, writing a plan, and popping out?
so most of the I start by doing strategic planning work, and
Okay.
that is a combination of the client and me working to collect some fresh consumer information. I usually run the survey on my platform. And I basically have created a 5 minute ANU based on consuming those documents for 10 years.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
normally 40-minute surveys from hell. Uh, I kid you not. I don't know
Yeah.
who the hell takes these things, but anyways, so I've got this super lean version, which gives us the behavioral insights for um, for the process, and then the session itself is a 1 or 2 day shebang. And
Gotcha.
and yeah, so they either leave with that, um, or they put me on retainer. So I'm always open to going on retainer with clients who want,
Okay.
and it's usually the teams who have some kind of skill. They have some either like a fairly junior person in a marketing role or something like that. So they want that coach there. And
Hmm.
what I do, I'm more like a coach sounding board in those retainers.
That
Um,
makes sense.
I'm like the general manager that the CEO can't be because they're not a professional.
Yeah. You're almost like an ad hoc advisory board member or something like
Yeah,
that.
right. But the nice thing is that I actually will tell you the truth because you're paying me to do so, and I don't have a conflict of interest called I wrote you a $5 million check.
Totally.
That always, I mean, you don't want to get me going on boards. And anyways, the way
Yeah, that's
kids,
one
the
of the things I love
kids,
about you is you've got very strong opinions.
kids, the way you design a board is the way you design a dissertation committee. The goal is have them eating out of your hands.
Yeah.
So you
Is to have
only
a
put people on the
pile of
board
impressive
who
yes men.
yes, that is the role of the board.
Yeah.
If you have a board that actually has opinions, you've already lost.
Yep. Absolutely.
so
There's so many things like that are broken about the business world, I feel.
yeah, but that's what the predatory investor is the guy who they don't want you to actually run the company. They want to run the company.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they go
Yeah, that
look for
makes
people
sense.
who are easily bullied, of which there are many,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's sort of what I do.
Okay. Well, let's jump into the book for a bit as well.
Awesome.
One of the things I was really liking about the book is just breaking down the different growth curves or different growth plans for brands, because when you're new to the industry and you're like seeing all these case studies of these quote unquote overnight successes, or these big brands that get launched with tons of money, and you're like, okay, I'm going to copy that formula. I'm going to do what they do. But when you don't have all that money, when you don't have all the
Yeah.
resources, when you don't
Right.
have distribution channels, etc., that plan is going to fail. And that's why a lot of these companies probably fail, is because they're not picking the right growth plan, right? So I liked that you broke down the different growth models. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I talk. So it's in. This is he's Gage talking about the introduction to my book, which, if you read nothing else, is the most important.
Yeah.
I there's basically what we found in the work that we did, that the Hartman Group let me publish. Thanks to them. Thanks again to them. Is uh, that most of the brands by the late 2010s that had scaled to 9 figures that were natural organic, they had done it in this sort of slow, horrendously painful geometric
Yeah.
linear growth curve, and anywhere from 15 to 25% year over year growth. Now that's really good growth compared to the market. Like, that's phenomenal. That, in fact, it's so phenomenal. If I had $500,000, I didn't know what to do with. I'd find a company like that and just throw it in there because I get a guaranteed
Yeah.
return.
Yeah.
In 10
Totally.
years, I would guarantee return. So,
It's not
it,
boom or bust. It's nice
yeah, I
steady
mean, it
growth.
wouldn't
Yeah.
be a unicorn tech stock return, but it would be a guaranteed
Yeah.
return. So the problem is that most of the brands grew that slowly. And if you look in data today, you're going to still see most of them growing in that sort of low double-digit range. But what we found in this randomized sample of brands, about 1,000 brands that we looked into, was that the ones that made it to nine figures, almost three-quarters of them did it through this skate ramp growth curve called that I dub in the book, and it's exponential growth. And the thing about exponential growth that's interesting is that it's not easy to achieve and sustain.
Yeah.
However, once you have the design DNA as your foundation, and that really comes down to, I hate to say it, your hero product, your hero UPCs, and essentially the wrapping, uh, the package symbolism on your D2C site or the website or the shelf that they're seeing. That's basically like an enormous amount of your win right there. And in fact, it's so much of the win that that's why I wrote so much, like a third of the book on design. Because
Yeah.
if you underthink this, guys, and just start throwing money at something that's underperforming because you didn't look at the KPIs, you're just sort of imagining in that it's successful, then this is where people do sort of drive the car into the ditch. But I would say that overall, Gage and the audience, the biggest actual problem is that people are growing too slowly in
Oh.
today's market to survive the copycats.
Oh, right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's actually, the people who work with me are terrified of deceleration. That's
Yeah.
basically my client audience. They're doing well,
Yep.
but they're also terrified that, oh shit, we're going to hit a glass ceiling, and then this dude over here who signed a venture cap, who has some predatory investor who ball busted them into a bad deal, but he's going to throw money at them. They're going to take the wind out of our sail. I mean, that's
Yeah.
my ideal client because
Well,
they've got a strong business, but they have a legitimate competitive concern now. And now what do we do?
absolutely. In your experience, are those copycat threats more likely to come from underneath, like other startups that saw what you're doing and want a piece of that action, or
Well,
from the
if you
top
go in,
with like big conglomerates launching their own version of what you're
it's
doing?
it's both, but early on, I would say up to about 25 to $30 million in revenue if you were the first. The problem is mainly from below. Big companies, having done a lot of this work, big companies do scan emerging brands down to like about $1 million through the
Yeah.
scanner data to, in their core categories. Absolutely. It's very easy to do. In fact, I ran around the country training them to do it. Sorry, guys. So
So it's your
that's
it's your
my
fault.
big, yeah, exactly. So yes, I have a guilt driven business. You're correct. So, it's probably partially honest, but they, they're aware, but they don't actually give a crap until you start to get to 30 million and plus. Cause now, and if you're still growing fast, then they get really concerned. And that's when they might
Yeah.
start planning a line extension to block you, or at least to jump on the bandwagon. Now, here's the good news. The good news is that most of the line extensions from the big companies, they may go out of the gate and make 20 million, 30 million right away, but they never grow because
Interesting.
the trademarks from those brands are just not premium and they're not credible. So when they go do the natural version of Oreo, it never goes anywhere. And I have looked at
Yeah.
almost every case study of companies
Interesting.
doing that. They get their little sliver, but it doesn't seem to have anything to do with Chobani.
Yeah.
So, Chobani just plows ahead. So I don't actually have any concern. And I tell my clients about, what Kraft and Coke are going to do, per se.
I mean, they can
I'm more,
outspend you, but what you're saying is they don't have the credibility to come in and compete with you.
yeah, they will. Here's the one way to put it: they can move fast to rip you off, stick their line extension out. But if the idea that you were that you offer to the universe really doesn't have a lot of addressable market anyways. I mean, if it has a lot of addressable market, sorry, then there's going to be plenty of room for you to sell the premium version. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
totally.
if
In
hummus,
fact,
for example, if hummus is a $3 billion addressable market space, then there's plenty of room for you to grow the premium version of Sabra. Plenty of
yeah. In fact, that brings up another thing from your book
room.
about kind of choosing too niche of products. I think
Right.
you go off on like kale chips or something, for
Well, this is
example.
my current concern with hard kombucha, for example. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Hey, y'all. We're going to take a quick break to let you know about a new podcast called Climify for designers, educators, and sustainability geeks.
Host and design educator Eric Benson interviews acclaimed climate scientists and sustainability experts to find out how designers can help combat the climate crisis in their college classrooms. The discussions on this program are geared to help you climify your syllabi to assign projects that not only teach design fundamentals, but also can have a positive impact on our climate. You can find Climify on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you want to join the conversation and become a climate designer, you can follow the show on Instagram at Climify Podcast, or head over to our great teaching resources at climatedesigners.org/edu.
All right, now let's get back to our conversation.
It has legs, but it also's got some problems, and a lot of people went in fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really fast, and you get some heavy hitters went in, like some rich dudes. So I would be more concerned with the rich serial entrepreneur. I shall
Oh,
not mention names, who's got way too much money in his Napa Valley mansion or wherever the hell he lives. Because he can snap his fingers and get a world class team that's functioning at a better level on day one, right? And
yeah.
so they become more of a problem, and that's when you want to really bone up on your strategy and what you're doing. I mean, the worst sector right now is plant based dairy alternative. I've never. Have you been to Sprouts, Gage? Have you counted the number of in the shelf stable? Go to the
Yeah.
shelf
I
stable
haven't.
things. It's insane.
Yeah, I haven't been to
All of
Sprouts in a while, but I do know
all
that
the,
category is blowing up,
and
huge.
there's all these brands, and they're moving half a unit per store per week, 1 unit per store. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, it's probably just like the Wild West days of that, where everyone's fighting for a little bit of market share, but only a few brands will come through.
Yeah, so those what I would call the hyper crowded spaces,
Yeah.
unfortunately, money is required to have a hope in hell. Like you don't have the time to do what's in my book.
Yeah. So there's like the inventing a
So
new category. There's like the inventing a new category of things that people don't know they want or they definitely don't want. And then there's
yeah,
and that takes forever to try to grow and change the industry, like 10, 20
yeah.
years or something. But then there's, like you're saying, the super oversaturated crowded markets that people need
So
to avoid.
I think there the value there's a value in innovation that has some serious technical insulation from copycatting.
Yeah.
And to be honest, plant-based meat had that for quite a while. We forget that, but it did. So the market there's a long period of time when Kellogg hadn't done the R&D.
Yeah.
They didn't. Now once they read their 7,000th PR release from Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger. Yeah, they started their R&D, and lo and behold, Incognito is like I think I read somewhere it's like the number 2 or 3 retail market. Boom, So
Dang.
definitely have screwed over those two companies at retail, right? Because
Yeah.
Morningstar is it's a brand everyone knows.
Yeah.
so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so this is the challenge. I mean, those are the spaces I would tell people just to stay away from unless you are heavily funded. But
Yeah.
that's not a reason not to innovate in other areas, because as long as food culture, for example, is continually innovating in certain parts of the grocery store, there's going to be room for what I call in the book the new modern way of doing X. right? And as long as you
Yeah.
can be that, um, uh, and plow away on it and double the business every year, you can grow exponentially even right now. So I do
Nice.
think it's hard
That's cool.
it's getting harder to create skate ramp brands, I will say, in part because
Yeah.
um, you need it's harder to find the areas in the store that are receptive to that level of innovation.
Yeah, and partly because so many people are looking at the whole store and finding all the little niche areas, and there's only so many categories left to reinvent. But
Yeah,
with
well,
that said, I
there's
do think
probably
the
there's probably a limited number of categories that were yeah there's a lot of demand for some big reinvention. Exactly.
yeah, yeah, and I think the companies that are just trying to invent a new category are going to have a long, expensive road. But there's probably, if you're gonna try to grow a brand, and maybe it doesn't have to be a skate ramp brand, but just you want
Yeah.
a decent growth, like just finding something where there's a gap in that market, like they don't have the gluten-free option yet, or they don't have the vegan option yet, or whatever it is, and just make a solid product that's slightly different from what else is everything else
Yeah, I
is
mean
out there,
that
and
if you read
hopefully a
my
trend.
book, if you read the first part of my book a couple of times, the big takeaway is don't over innovate.
Hmm. Yeah, make small tweaks,
Because
right?
yeah, because that's how you wind up um, buried in sort of the niche within the niche. I mean, I think that's been
Absolutely.
going on with some of the baby food brands recently. Just to be
Yeah.
honest, is
Yeah.
that you've got actually a not very big category. Then you've got a category which behaviorally and culturally is actually driven mostly by lower income moms.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So then you
So
have to delete. You end up having large chunks of the category that are totally out of reach from price alone. There's just not a lot of market space left for. And the weird thing is that people can come up with all sorts of exotic innovations in baby
yeah,
food
but there's only so
because
much space.
you've got the mom's anxiety over child development. That's basically what you're working with, which is that's a very fertile area. So,
Yeah.
the market,
Yep. I mean, that's where a lot of consumers enter the natural organic space, for
yeah,
example, is when they just have
yep,
babies. So yeah, it is a obvious like
exactly.
first step for sure. So we've only got a few minutes left here, but I'd love to part some of your knowledge onto the listeners. So what do you feel like are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing people make right now, and therefore what would your advice be for a brand that wants to grow through these kind of odd times that we're facing with inflation, supply chain difficulties, oversaturated markets, etc.?
Yes, I think in the current unknown environment, and one of the biggest unknowns, Gage, is that we haven't entered a period of sustained high inflation, which I believe we're in since the 1970s. And back then, premium CPG basically didn't exist.
Yeah, yeah,
So we do have an unknown that I recognize as well as an author and a researcher. What I would tell people is that this is the time. Uh, this is the time to really step back and assess the fundamentals of your of velocity for your business. How are you able to increase essentially your annual revenue per consumer, whether it's digital or brick? um, and how can you have a relationship with your consumer that will guarantee essentially longer retention? Now,
nice.
the problem is that retention gets analyzed in CPG under this horrendous term loyalty,
Brand loyalty. Yeah,
which is almost like religious in overtones. Um,
yeah,
it leads, so it's like, and I think the reality is that most people aren't that exclusive to brands in a category. But if you've invested the time to acquire somebody who's buying more than once a month, which is what you need to be doing, you want to keep them. This is the time right now economically where you want to work even harder to keep your fans around. And it's going to be a lot easier to
yeah,
sell them another 2 packs a year.
yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
this is not going to be an easy time to throw money and try to buy trial in the middle class. That's a game for the rich, overfunded, 8-figure
Yeah,
companies. And I work with one of them and I tell them to do that. I mean, hey, you got the money? Go. But that's
Yeah.
just not going to work if you're $1 million company, $5 million company. You got to focus on your fans. And this is just another reason. This is like an extreme situation where that's so important.
Yeah. And do you feel like there's like one clear winning strategy for doing that, for like focusing on your fans and retaining them?
I don't think there's a
Or
single
is it just
playbook
like
at
it depends on
all.
your category, it depends on your product, depends on your brand?
I don't think there's a single tactical playbook because some categories they skew towards things like field marketing and event experiences like liquor, um, for cultural reasons. In other categories, you're going to have to use other techniques. Could be recipe marketing, but I think the point is that you want to create a direct owned media relationship with your consumers. That's basically what I would say to answer your question. So to me, that's an email list or an SMS list.
Yeah.
If you
That makes
cannot
sense.
build that, if you cannot build that over time, that's actually diagnostic information.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like
Like,
that's been one of the best things from the pandemic is everyone realized, oh crap, we
well,
need direct relationships. So a
well,
lot of brands have
I,
started building those, but it is
and to
valuable.
me, it's about understanding your fans. It's more about research and better
Yeah,
strategy and
absolutely.
better planning, more than just about sales volume.
Yeah,
So that's one reason to have a D2C website and a Shopify account. Is not always to scale volume, but it's also to have a way to learn from your consumers. Now, um, and that's the mistake, honestly, that I see people continuing to make is they're so focused on selling and growing the top line, more cases, more cases, more cases, that they're not learning about their fans in those early years when that they've got to figure that out. They got
yeah,
to figure
absolutely.
it out. So,
Yeah,
um,
that makes total sense. It's a million times easier to A/B test and learn some data or whatever around your consumers in an email list or on your website than it is at retail,
well,
right? So
or
when you
something
own
even
those
more 20,
relationships, you can move fast.
even 20th century, like just if you have 1,500 people on email list, send out an email list and, offer them a free case if they'll talk to you for 30 minutes on the phone.
Nice.
It's like, you'd be surprised.
Old school phone
Yeah,
calls. What?
yeah,
What
no,
is
I
this?
tell people just all the time, like, hello,
Yeah.
talk to them.
Yeah. That makes sense. Sometimes picking up the phone is the most important thing you can do.
um, yeah,
That's awesome.
there. I mean, the
Well, I
beauty is
appreciate.
that the early stage companies, Gage, that we're talking about, you actually have consumers who are they're itching to do that,
Yeah.
like that. There's no problem getting them on the phone. Like Oreo has a problem getting people on the phone.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, these early stage companies are usually built around some sort of greater purpose, often just like solving a
Yep.
allergen problem or,
Yeah.
you know, building more equity in the food system. So their fans are a little bit more emotionally attached from day one. Whereas the emotional attachment to Oreo is the sugar high you get for a
Right.
moment after after you eat them, right? But you don't no very few people are like as attached to the brand unless it's just something you grew up with and it's like a comfort food for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think remember if you're really innovating in in the food and beverage space, you are actually altering the culture. Like
Yeah.
you are the hero change agent in some weird way. Whereas when you're running Oreo, you are a slave to culture's definition of what Oreo is.
Interesting.
And they used to, all the marketing people used to hate me at the big companies because I would tell them this, like, you don't control your brand. Your brand is controlled by society. Like the best hope you have is to work within that definition. And if
Yeah.
you keep ignoring it, you're going to keep having the same bad performance. So
Makes sense.
it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good place to wrap up because I know you got to get going. I appreciate you popping in for a moment to share a little bit of your wisdom and talk about your book and your consulting practice. And thanks for sharing that wisdom with us. I think it's just much needed information for a lot of people who are especially jumping into this industry kind of green and not knowing what they're doing. Like giving them some base context on all the issues they could avoid, I think will help a lot of people skip a few years of hard learned lessons. So I appreciate that.
I hope so. Ramping Your Brand is on Amazon for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, and we'll In the show notes and links and everything, we'll link out to all your, various sites as well as the book. So
Awesome.
they'll know where to find it. Cool.
Cool.
All right. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about James, his consultancy, Premium Growth Solutions, or his book, Ramping Your Brand, subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel for more innovator interviews, expert advice, and leadership discussions. If you like this episode, leave a heart, thumbs up, or review, and share it with your colleagues. As an ever-evolving show, we also love feedback, so send us your thoughts or ideas for who we should talk to next to evolve@modernspecies.com.